The internal watchdog at the DOJ, Michael Horowitz, released his long-awaited report on how James Comey and the FBI handled the Clinton email probe. The report about a probe that faced intense political scrutiny, and it's already getting some of the same treatment tonight. But let's focus on the key facts and legal issues in this report, not cherry-picking it for any particular agenda. Here is how the FBI director explained the big takeaway just within the last hour.
This report did not find any evidence of political bias or improper considerations actually impacting the investigation under review.
That's one top line, but let's dig in and do this right now. The first fact that I think comes through is that under Comey, the FBI was obsessed with managing its media perception instead of just doing its job and letting the chips fall. Now, that's not illegal. It's not even always a fireable offense, but the report shows the FBI leadership obsessed with appearance and their own predictions of how a decision might play out in the political arena. Consider this: 84 references to appearance in this report, 39 mentions of reputation, another 33 to perception. And that's because there are many, many sentences in here, in this exhaustive 500-page report, about managing perception, although it finds no laws were broken. And it finds that a lot of people exercised poor judgment and then defended their choices as essential to help manage the FBI's reputation. That, for example, is how the report treats Loretta Lynch's tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton. It notes they didn't discuss the Hillary case, so it was legally okay, but it looked bad. Now, the report is much harder on James Comey. It echoes experts who says all of his public emoting about the Clinton case violated policy, but again notes those are matters of judgment. And Comey's motivation was that he thought those actions would basically make the FBI look good. As you probably know, they didn't. And Comey being Comey, he says he'd do it all over the same way.
Even in hindsight, and this has been one of the world's most painful experiences, I would make the same decision.
The report is, of course, more. It's about more than any one official, which is useful as you think about reform. Remember, Comey's deputy is Andy McCabe, and he's a key witness to potential White House obstruction. And thus he's someone Trump has targeted. So the author of this report, Michael Horowitz, departed from another DOJ policy himself and basically looked like he was obeying Trump's timeline to criticize McCabe for how he talked about his media contacts regarding the Clinton investigations. Some experts say that calls into doubt Horowitz's judgment. And now this report shows just how common FBI media contacts are. Horowitz noting profound concerns about how many unauthorized contacts there were between the FBI personnel and the press. I'm going to show you charts based on the report that show how frequent it was for FBI employees. There are all the different nodes of that circle contacting reporters in 2016 alone, or this chart where you have a reporter reaching 18 FBI employees and another reporter on the phone with FBI employees, including executives and special agents, up to 30 times. And they weren't just talking to each other. The report finds FBI employees got tickets to sporting events and golf outings and drinks with the media. And the report suggests all of that media management is excessive for the FBI. We also know, and this is kind of interesting, they weren't very good at it. The report notes that even though there were recusals specifically to avoid the appearance of a pro-Clinton bias, that's something the FBI kept secret, even though the whole purpose was to avoid a perception of bias. If something is supposed to address a public perception, it doesn't work if it's secret, which this new report notes, saying this approach, quote, made no sense. Now, if we take a breath, you might say, Ari, this is a lot of talk about perception in the media. Yes. That's the problem. We don't really need an FBI that's good at reputation management or reacting to Republicans in Congress. We need a Federal Bureau of Investigation that's good at federal investigations. This report's a reminder of how many serious people in Washington clearly don't understand how their world has already changed. These are not normal times. If you're watching the news right now, I bet you know that. But this report shows many FBI leaders operating on the ridiculous premise that if they could just publicly explain to their harshest partisan critics and their tormentors and right-wing media why they think they did the right thing, then the perception would relate to that truth, that people would treat them fairly. Maybe there was a bygone era when that was true, but it's not what happened in 2016, and you know it's not the way it works today. Now, I got to tell you something else. The report reveals an FBI agent involved in the Clinton case had really bad judgment, talking tough and writing that maybe, quote, we'll stop it when it comes to Trump's election. Now, that's an unacceptable motive for any FBI agent. Although the good news is, for America, the report finds those kind of texts, well, they did damage the reputation, notice that obsession again, but it also finds the good news that while the agent talked tough, he did not act on that, and no one else did inside the FBI. As for reputation, there's another discovery from this report that I got to highlight for you, and actually, I think we got to go ahead and change the monitor. Can we do that? Yes. But his emails. Because this report notes that while James Comey was out there slamming Clinton for her personal email use, he was using his own personal email for FBI business. It does not get more absurd than this.
There is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information.
Now, you can see there from the report, it says Comey used his personal email accounts to conduct FBI business. Busted. That is new tonight. And let me tell you something. That is chutzpah on steroids times a million. Now, ultimately, law and order is not just about perception, it's about justice. The report has some pretty careful language written in a lawyerly way that still fundamentally roasts James Comey, and that adds to the public criticism about his whole handling of the case. So you may hear some people, particularly political people on the right, say all of this shows why he should be fired, which of course is a reasonable hypothetical, but also irrelevant, because the president told Lester Holt this is not why he fired Comey. And that firing itself is part of what Bob Mueller's investigating, an investigation that Trump appointees like Rod Rosenstein and the new FBI director are constitutionally required to support. And that is where the implication of some of the findings in this report matter most. Beyond perception and media contacts, if those leaders still think they can work the refs and can negotiate on due process or on the facts with the people whose stated goal is to stop investigations, to undermine law enforcement, and the current open probe, then we could all face something much more grave than perception or Inspector General reports. We could face the clash of conscience that comes when law enforcement leaders have to choose between the pressure they face, the pressure on the perception, and the Constitution they're duty-bound to serve. That could be up ahead, and that's why it's called a constitutional crisis. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.